What's up, Kevin?
Hey man, how's it going?
Looks like you're on the road because this time it's your turn to be strapped into a $12 pair of Apple AirPods that are wired like me last week.
Yes, indeed. I'm
You have a
visiting
fancy
your
setup just in case your audio doesn't sound super pro today.
yes. Although it should be all right. But now I'm
Yeah, it should be all
visiting
right.
your old town. I'm in LA. I'm in Santa Monica.
You're in Lala. Oh, you're in Santa Monica? Like, where in Santa Monica are you?
Don't know where I'd like to advertise.
Okay, you sure about that? Send a drone there. I will, right after this, send you a long list of places you have to go eat, and then tell me how much you love them, and I miss them so much being in a little bit of a food desert here in Utah, but I'll give you some good recommendations. Kevin, happy tax day. The only thing that makes tax day a little less enjoyable is having every Anthropic product go down that morning as I'm trying to finish my filing, and I've got like these massive projects with tons and tons of attachments, doing this assessment and then doing a last sanity check before I sign and send to the IRS and then give them all of my money. And as I tried to do that, I got a smattering of all sorts of little error pop-ups that ranged from spanner not found to Stripe not connected. And I'm like, I'm not using Stripe. What are you talking about? Just all these errors. And of course, I go to their status page and it's just lit up red across the board. And I go through my little usual routine of trying to work around it. Well, maybe the desktop app works, maybe the mobile app works. And then I just gave up, but it's back up and running. It's crazy. I sent you a text message and I said I had this moment where I felt like I walked into the office that morning and just the entire team was out sick. Like everybody, the whole office was out sick. So I had all these agents were supposed to be running, all these things I was supposed to do. And I already started thinking ahead about how much of my day was completely nerfed because this one model took a crap. It's
Uh,
wild, right?
so in my case, I woke up at like 4 a.m. because I'm on Pacific time. And I was so excited to use that time to I was going to build this and I
Get
was
shit
going to
done.
build that. And I had all of these plans and I got just deep enough into it. It broke at about 6:15 this morning that I was totally stuck in exactly the same way. So when you sent me your text, what did you say? Something about realizing that you were dependent on one dealer and
Oh, I said it's like I woke up realizing that I've got this awful heroin addiction and never made a plan of what to do if my dealer disappeared.
And yes, so what did I do? I trotted around the corner and I started whispering to my friend Codex over at GPT Land. I
Yeah.
cheated on Claudius and I started actually leaning into trying to figure out how to create some duplicate versions of my workflows. A, because I've kind of been meaning to anyway, just to
Yeah.
get a better feel for where Codex sits. Obviously, we've been talking a ton about Claude Code on this show over the last weeks because it is sort of getting the edge. But these instabilities are causing people to experiment more with Codex. And if you're in the GPT world, it's not like OpenAI isn't paying attention to what Claude is doing. So there's a lot of functionality that is popping up on the GPT side to replicate Claude Cowork. Codex is faster, it is cheaper to run, and often it will catch bugs that Cloud Code won't. I'm not necessarily jumping ship or anything like that, but understanding that there are other options out there is pretty important for resiliency in your workflows and resiliency in your business. The tool thing, however, that is a problem. I think we have 22 different tools that we've built over the last few months that do different things in the business that range from workflows to actual platforms, like the platform that we're going to use to process this podcast, for example.
Right.
It's all built on Claude. And it really isn't easy yet to make a platform that does automatic model shifting because the underlying logic changes and the prompt changes and it's pretty challenging. So you have a single source of supply, and that's where it makes it feel like everybody's out sick today because all of the tools broke at once.
And not to throw this word around loosely, but in agentic workflows, when you're talking about some of these tools that you're calling, and you have a whole series of steps, those steps might be very specific to how that model works and handles those steps. And you might have gone through weeks or months of iterations on that, like I have to get it to where it is. And you can't just sub out the brain that's running all that seamlessly. Like you can't just say, oh, Claude's down. I'm just going to pop Gemini into this and expect it to work the same. And I really think it's worth mentioning and maybe unpacking the difference because I want to get into not only that redundancy, but the cost associated with powering these things. The difference between this web UI, like this browser that most people go to, most people aren't even paying for this experience, right? They just go to Anthropic's website and they type in a prompt and they get an answer and they have this experience, or maybe they're paying $20 a month so they can have better models and more usage, or maybe they're like us paying either 100 or $200 a month to get even more out of that and more usage and longer session durations, right? And that's one experience. But the experience that you're talking about with the tools that you built are actually using the API key in your account. And that has absolutely nothing to do with that 20, 100, or $200 a month that you're paying. It's completely different. And I want people to understand that, because this is really, really important for how it's being used at work, and especially important because of some changes that Anthropic made 10 days ago to how this all works. It's very meaningful, financially at least. So yeah, do you want to take a first pass at that, Kevin? Just kind of differentiating how those two worlds work independently and sometimes coexist for people.
I think it's a good point to be made that, as you said, most people are just signing up. $20. If they're using a max plan on Claude, it's $100. GPT now offers a similar plan. And if you're using either the browser functionality, or if you're using Cowork, or if you're using Claude Code or Codex on the GPT side through the apps, you have a certain number of tokens. Everybody knows what tokens are at this point, but just it's the base unit of currency of AI. We hear a lot about this. It's about 75% of a word. Roll with it. And tokens are the variable cost of this stuff. And if you're paying for the $100 max plan, that gives you an allocation of tokens by hours and hour blocks. And you will exhaust more tokens by using a smarter model. Like the Opus model is smarter than the Sonneton model. It thinks longer. It uses more tokens. If you have really long context, like you're using a really long chat, recognize that by the time you get to the 300th line in that chat, it's actually going back and compounding all of that information that's behind it, and it will rapidly use up your tokens. So particularly on the cheap Claude plan, if you use Opus, you can run out of tokens in like 6 or 7 prompts, or even 3 or 4 prompts if you're doing
Right.
something complicated. And it'll flash up this warning that's like, your quota will refresh in 4 hours, and your hands are hovering over the keyboard. And it does give you this handy dandy option to pay as you go, which is not a bad option, but it can be really, really expensive to use. So sort of there's a
Yeah.
side note pro tip there is put $50 or $100 into Claude so that you don't so totally grind to a halt, so you can actually finish whatever that process is. But don't rely on it because it's going to be really expensive. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's the paid universe. That's just the plan universe of how these things work. And then on the API side, this is where the real dollars are being spent. Where if you are developing an app, okay, so the app that we built to do the podcast processing uses, it probably has 9 or 10 different API calls to Claude to do certain things in it. So we built the ability to ask all of the transcripts of the podcast questions. So in case we're on the pod and we're not sure if we said something before, we can really quickly ask a question of basically our own private chatbot. Well, that bounces off of the information that's in the database, and it goes through the API. And then we're being charged for that based on fractions of a penny per 1,000 tokens or million tokens or whatever it is. And that's totally different than it just being your monthly plan. Reasonable?
Yeah, here's what I'll add to that. And this is where the changes really make a difference about what happened 10 days ago with Anthropic. That meter that you're talking about with this API call and those tokens that you burn, it's much more measurable. It's much more of an exact science. Like, you can really start to understand a certain process that your software is doing, or a query that somebody is making on your software, and then just how many tokens that is going to use. For example, I had a good friend who did this really cool business analysis app, and it was using Opus in the background, which is the big fancy Claude model. And then she realized that every time somebody did this, and this was a lead magnet, by the way, it was costing her $30 in tokens, right? not very sustainable, but she could measure that and then see that outcome and then plan for it pretty precisely. Now, on the consumer side, when you just pay your 20, 100, or 200 a month, it kind of reminds me of how everybody back in the day was promising that Bitcoin was going to be the next thing that we were all going to transact with. I was going to buy my coffee with Bitcoin or a leather jacket with Bitcoin or a motorcycle with Bitcoin. But it changed all the time, right? The actual meter changed all the time. So one day it might be a cup of coffee and the next day it might be a motorcycle, but it's the same amount of Bitcoin. So what's been happening with Anthropic on this consumer side with your regular subscription is that, I'll be working and I'll send a text message to you and say, hey, what's going on? I'm just using Sonnet, and all of a sudden I hit my session limit. Yeah, me too. This is so weird. It's like they're throttling my usage. I'm like, I got to keep working. I'm going to buy another $100 worth of credit here. Okay, cool. Yeah, me too. And then all of a sudden, like the next day, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. I only got 3 prompts out of Opus, and now my entire session allocation is gone, and I'm paying 100 a month. What's going on? But then the next day, it's different. All of a sudden, next day, you get like twice the number, 3 times the number of prompts. So somebody is back there behind the curtains, and they've got these levers that they're pulling, and they're constantly adjusting and testing people's price sensitivity and tolerance. And after a exceptionally bad week of running out of all of our token allocation on the paid plans, both you and I noticed that we got these little notifications saying, "Hey, claim your free $100, your free $200 of credit." Because if you start asking around some of the models to do some research of, "Am I just going crazy, or is this a problem right now?" It'll go scrub all these Reddit threads and come up with a lot of people making a lot of complaints. That kind of plays into what happened on April 4th. So one of the little workarounds to having this broader allocation of tokens on a little more of a forgiving meter than the API call was to do things like hook an agent up to your max plan and then just let it run wild. And technically you were violating their terms of service by doing so. There were some stories of people's accounts getting suspended, but I still know a lot of people who did it because the alternative was paying hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month to have these agents run. So on April 4th, Anthropic killed the little workarounds that existed before that thousands of developers had quietly relied on. And that was this ability to run these third-party agent frameworks like OpenClaw, which we've talked many times about on the show. I'm not going to go too deep into that one right now. So this flat Claude Pro or Max subscription had like maybe 135,000 OpenClaw instances that were running it all the time. And, the economics of doing that for $200 a month versus like $1,000 to $5,000 worth of agent compute really pushed Anthropic to patch every pathway with hard errors. And if you want to run an agent on Claude now or power your app or do whatever you want to do with that, you've got to use the API and you have to pay per token. And Opus 4.6 runs $15 million input tokens and $75 million on output on the regular. And so, a lot of this really upset a lot of people. Anthropic offered a bunch of credits to other people's monthly plans. They started throwing discounts around because there was a big uproar. But we've always talked about over and over, Kevin, that we're getting a disproportionate amount of value from the price of all of these models today, all of the frontier models. And that at some point, the subsidizing is going to stop, right? Like there'll be a day of reckoning where you have to pay. And I feel like this is one of those dominoes that fell 10 days ago.
Yeah, I mean, this is a super active conversation.
Yeah.
My bet, and maybe I'm wrong, is I thought it was going to take a little bit longer, that cynically they were going to really let us get hooked on their heroin. And, people start making staffing decisions and rejiggering the way their business is run. And then you wake up on some Tuesday and they're like, look, this isn't economic for us because we're a nice company. We're not going to just do this blindly. We're going to tell you that we're doing this because we only have so much capacity and we're draining the lakes in the Midwest for your cat videos and whatever. We're going to have to start charging you, but it does feel a little bit premature. And just based on my own reaction this morning, where I still have plenty of flexibility and choices, it was a little bit painful. But I actually had my workflows, my core personal workflows that link in HubSpot and ClickUp and my email and my calendar and LinkedIn and like all of these different things. It was pretty easy for me to just recreate all of that on the GPT side. And then you have the gorilla in the room who is Google, who's standing out there, who has,
Mhm.
of those three, it's the only one that actually has plenty of cash. That, the other two, okay, they have a lot of investment capital. And yes, they are starting to create revenues in the billions, but their expenses are in the hundreds of billions. So Google is still has, it's just a cash cow as far as making all of this money. And they all have to sort of play the game of racing towards features such that you acquire users while waiting out the market tolerance to pay more for those features, knowing full well that Google can be the spoiler out there and keep their prices low, basically, and just starve the other two.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty accurate. As far as labs shipping stuff, it's just exhausting. Like the amount of stuff coming out all the time is exhausting. But again, if it was a race, Anthropic is winning it. Like I've been working in tech for 28 years. I've never seen a single company ship so much stuff so often. It's just makes your head spin. Getting my hands in there and using it for many, many workflows, ranging from writing to complete automations that are doing the job of two or three different people on a daily basis. I'm still getting the best results and the best utility out of those Anthropic models. So when they do a price change like this, or they shut off one avenue to be able to use the product, say like, oh, now you're going to start paying. It definitely hits as a small business, and makes you start to really consider, okay, what are the contingency plans? How far do you want to go in one direction before painting yourself into some technology corner and not being able to have alternatives, right? Like it's solving a lot of problems right now, but if you're not careful with your planning, with your change management, with how you set up this manifesto in your company, it can also get you into hot water really, really quickly, because it's a very, very quickly evolving place right now. Right? This is all changing.
So this is also just a point in time, though. I think the other contention that I make, and I may have said this in a previous episode, Opus 4.6 is amazing. And
Hmm.
if they just stopped everything now and said all you get is Opus 6, like people like us and people like most small companies, even with some of the foibles and issues, it will absolutely change everything. And I've been saying this for 3 years as each model comes along. This is a really, really good one. And yes, there will be an Opus 5.0 at some point that is going to be like the Mythos thing, and like it's going to be absolutely nuts. But if you look at the historical cost of the older models, they get commoditized and they cost less. So right now, $15 per million tokens is the Opus cost. Today's Opus is tomorrow's Sonnet. So you'll have Sonnet 5.0, which will only be $2. That is probably the Opus model of today. And what a lot of us are going to end up doing is we're going to be finding the least common denominator model that meets the business case. And I suspect that the platforms will do things like off time sequencing and tolling and things like that, such that okay, you're using a cheaper model, so the trade-off is it's going to take longer. You don't just get to
Right.
pivot in your chair and have your app done. You actually have to go get a coffee and come back to have your app done on the other side. Or I think about all of the automations I've built. Most of them trigger at 5 o'clock in the morning, and that's sort of arbitrary. Like, why couldn't they just queue up over the night and take advantage of excess capacity in the models? Sort of like a
Well,
load controller in a house.
to be fair, that's happening right now with Anthropic too, right? Like that's another thing, is that it's kind of like getting an Uber. Oh, it's 5 p.m. on a Friday night. Guess what, buddy? Surge charging. And the same thing is starting to happen right now with peak business hours with using these models. You're actually going to rip through your allocation of tokens on these pay plans faster than if you were running something at 2 or 3 in the morning. So, now I'm playing this scheduling game, which I actually have an agent doing this for me, like looking at what jobs can run on what hours so that I'm getting the most out of my plan. Again, as long as I stay inside of that Anthropic ecosystem and I'm not making API calls, you can really start to stretch out that monthly subscription as well based on when you're using these different tools.
So let's be clear about this. When is the cutoff? So I'm on Pacific time, you're on Mountain time.
Mhm.
What is considered prime time now as far as Anthropic? Again, that's that window that you tip into, and all of a sudden your tokens get consumed by 4x the rate. Okay, you want to
Yeah.
stay outside of that if you can. For our listeners, when is that time? Right now. This is probably going to change, but what is it right now?
Yeah, I think last I looked, it was East Coast time between 8 in the morning and 11 in the morning was like considered peak. If you went into the afternoon, it lessened. If you went into the middle of the night or, early evening, it was actually really good. Middle of the night being the best. And again, when I mentioned there are little dials being turned behind the scenes, we still don't know exactly what the numbers on those dials are, how far they're being turned or when they're being turned. So all this stuff is really speculative, and a lot of it comes from just the experience of seeing like, wow, my session just went up and I just had like 3 prompts on Opus. What happened? But working at 11 o'clock at night, I had 9 and I was fine. That's weird. So a lot of it, you just have to get in there and start using this stuff. But they did say that all of this kind of time-based metering was stuff that they were rolling out, along with filling all of the little holes that allowed people to use the paid plans to run agents and stuff like that. That's what I mean by it's very, very evolving. This stuff is just changing every single day. So it's
So
it's it's good to have backup plans.
a little bit of a gut check here that most people who are really upset about this are using the $20 plans. And that is so cheap given that this is this amazing supercomputer that can
Yeah.
automate like parts of your work. It's very odd that we've calibrated on this very, very small number. And at $20, you get X. At $100, you get 5x. Okay, that's linear. At $200, you get 20x. So it's giving you a big bump. And I have well, now that I'm on the $200 a month plan, I basically don't
Wait,
run
wait.
out.
You're back on the $200 a month plan because you went
Yeah,
down to the $100 a month plan and now that just
I
wasn't
keep
enough for you,
trying.
huh?
Well. Okay, I play the game every month. I'm this cheap. I go into my Claude subscription and every month I downgrade it to 100. Okay, cool. And then the next month, if I end up in a pinch, I'm like, oh, heck. Okay, now I have to upgrade it and I'll upgrade it. And this month I made it all the way to April 1. I literally had to upgrade it
Wow.
on April 1st.
Wow.
So,
So
yeah,
I
but
I think it
$200 a month, $200 a month. Like,
yeah.
if you don't know what you're doing and you're just getting in there and you're chatting and you're doing kind of basic stuff, okay, I get it. But as soon as you bridge beyond the chatbot and you start doing an automation, like I would pay $200 a month for most of the automations that I've already built. And I hope Dario isn't listening. I would probably pay $500 a month. And
Yeah.
where is that equilibrium in the market versus the value that people are getting? And I don't think that enough people are getting that value out yet. And it would be too much of a pushback, either based on API pricing, which can be very expensive, or upping these plans. So, as I said before, it's just a bit of a waiting game until that happens. And you basically want to be in a place where the value is so clear. It's like, shut up and take my money. Cool, 500
Yeah.
bucks. Totally get it. I no longer have to do X, Y, and Z in my world. And formerly, I was having to pay a contractor or a vendor or something to do that. So this is no brainer territory. It's not there yet for most people.
It's not. And I think when you're so deep in the weeds with this stuff, a lot of it hits different for you, right? Including the economic impact. But it's always interesting talking to other people and how they're using this at work. And I had a conversation with an agency owner yesterday and really got a sense at how material like that economic shift can be with like one small rule change. So with what you were talking about, Kevin, when you said, "Oh, I have all these tools," and then when Anthropic went down today, all those tools stopped working because they're making this API call. All of those tools that you're using, you don't really have a choice. Like you built something custom, you used Claude code, and then you got to hook it up to, I mean, you could hook it up to whatever model you want, but you hooked it up to either Sonnet or Opus to do what it has to do. And you're just paying per API call. Like you're paying for the tokens. You can put limits on it in case it gets too crazy, but that's just the world you're in. And so, you know, this open source agentic framework that we've talked about a bunch of times, OpenClaw, what it does is, it's you can hook it up to whatever model you want, right? You could hook it up to a variety of models. You could do model routing. You could say, I want to use GPT for this. I want to use Gemini for that. I want to use Sonnet for this task over here. And it will go and pick and choose and do all that for you. But what a lot of people were doing were paying for that $200 a month max plan with a couple little tricky workarounds in the terminal. They're able to power these agents with that, right? So when that stopped, when I talked to this agency owner, he said he had 3 different OpenClaw agents that were actively in 3 different Slack channels, like for clients, for his team. These things are doing real work. They're producing content, they're publishing content, they're doing all sorts of stuff. And I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing, man. So what model are you using for these agents? And he said, oh, I'm using Opus. I mean, these workflows are pretty complex and it requires Opus. Wow, okay. Okay, now you basically can't hook up your pro plan to this. What is that looking like for you as far as token costs? You want to take a guess like what these 3 agents are burning per
Well,
month? And listen, man, I will preface it with saying like, this is nothing earth shattering. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're doing this and you figured it out. It's like, yeah, they're doing some human work. And honestly, I wasn't super impressed with the outputs. You want to guess how much that bill is every month?
I would guess $5,000, maybe
Oh,
somewhere in
so
there.
yeah, man, between 5 and
Hmm.
$7,000 a month.
Yep. So
5 and that's those are starting to be real costs, right? And he argued, "Hey, these would be 3 different employees that I'd be paying 80 to $100,000 a year," which I also kinda had a question looking at the output of the work. I don't know. Or 10,000 in the Philippines. I don't know. But, yeah, yeah, that turns into, a real line item. Now that's a 50 to $60,000 a year line item on your P&L for token costs that used to be $200 a month, and then a switch got flipped. And for a small business or a business just getting out of the gates, that's very material. Like that's very material.
I would think that would be just a full on blocker because this still isn't easy. Even
Yeah,
doing consultancies, engagements, and trying to get people activated with this stuff, it's complicated. We exist, I guess. So, yeah, that's going to be a big ask. But I do maintain that you're going to see a decline in good enough quality, and good enough quality is going to be X what it was just a year ago. And you still have Meta in the wings. So they renamed their Llama series because previous Llamas were sad. So now I forget exactly what they're calling it.
the
But at
total
the
brand refresh. They had to just get
total
rid of
brand
that.
refresh,
Yeah,
yeah.
a little bit of negative connotation
You
there.
know, they're doing interesting things with it internally, but that's the sort of model that will pop out there at some point and it'll be really cheap. Or Kimi, one of the Chinese models, is really cheap, that's floating around out there. Like people are going to find ways to make this make sense. And not everybody needs the Ferrari. They truly don't. And that actually might be somewhat of a problem with the business models that are predicating the big frontier labs, is that as they're investing in all of this capacity, it's anticipating a continued linear growth in the quality of the models, which is, by the way, still playing out, and that people are going to pay for those models at that frontier price. And it's sort of like you see extended thinking and you see pro thinking in some of the models. Like for mere mortals who aren't doing like polymer research, there's really no reason to be using like those sort of settings in these models at this point because they're already quite good. So who cares if we're at Opus 6.0 and it's, solving cancer, awesome. Let's, devote the process resources to that. But for those of us who are doing Slack interactions and blogs and things like that, it's okay that your model isn't quite as brilliant if it's
Yeah.
if it's cost effective enough. So I'm optimistic, is I think that my point there, that this will normalize in a way that the variable costs of operating these models, as long as you're thinking about that over time, it's going to work out, but it will get more expensive from a fixed cost perspective in the short term.
Totally, totally. And I wanted to run this by you too, man. I thought this was really interesting. I just love talking to people and seeing how they're actually using AI at work, right? And then looking at the outputs of what they're getting, looking at how they wrap their heads around the cost structures and where this is going to go for them in their business. And one of the traps I constantly fall into is I will open up my social media feed and see all the no code bros going on and on. It used to be N8N, then it was like, oh, everybody's using OpenClaw, and now everybody's building custom agents, so they're using Cowork. And these stories about, I did this, this, and this, and my agent did all this while I was sleeping, and these were the outputs, and it's running my entire services business for me, and this is my customer support agent, and this one manages issues, and this one does all my marketing. I actually got to see two end results of people's agentic workflows in the world of content publishing. Okay. And tricky content publishing, not just writing blogs or posting on LinkedIn, but creating videos. And there's a lot of steps that have to happen for something like that, right? You have to have whatever that content source is, your video rendering. If there's voice, which there was in this case, like do you hook it up to something like 11 Labs and make all that work? And this was a start to finish machine, two different cases. One of the guys you actually know, Kevin, so I'll have to talk to you about this later offline. So it's pretty funny. But the end result was actually publishing to social channels, rich media, video, right? And I will also note that neither of these people came from the world of being these are video experts or content experts, or they really have some kind of authoritative taste as to what good content is, like what's going to perform out there. And so they jump through all these hoops of building these agents and buying all these tokens and running this whole thing. And I'm looking at the outputs and I'm like, wow, this is just complete AI slop. Like this is awful. This is objectively awful. Like this is garbage. Like, and listen, I'm not, performance marketing expert, but I knew enough that I could look at this asset and say that if this was a creative for an ad or for organic social, this would do nothing. Like people would swipe right past this because it's really, really bad. Right. So I just started thinking about, where we are in that whole life cycle of these real workflows that are actually replacing people and how important it is to be that human in the loop that's actually has expertise in your domain of the thing that's being produced. Because in this case, both these people thought, like, I am circumventing the entire burden of a marketing team, right? Like, they are going from ideation to creation to publication all on their own. And look at this. I'm just watching my Instagram channels light up. I'm like, wow, how's that performing? Well, we're just getting started. There's not a lot of likes right now or a lot of followers happening. And I'm like, I can tell you why that is. Like, this is really, really bad, right? Because they try to skip over that step of somebody has to have expertise in this domain to know a good output for versus a bad output, right? And like, how many other areas do you see that exact same thing happening right now with people trying to rush to the end without kind of running through this process the correct way?
Okay, so first, from a marketing pro tip perspective, if you just are generating your content via AI, inherently getting the median type content that's just been absorbed by the Borg and like you're just regurgitating it. And it's not like the algorithms don't recognize that. Your job as a marketer, and we're all marketers in some way, shape, or form, actually hasn't really changed in this area, is to create new value for customers such that they engage with your brand. And you can do that really generously, or you can do that by just shooting a cannon at them in some way, shape, or form. But you need to be a really good marketer to lever the technologies in new ways. And you have to make sure that humans are staying on top of it. And the conversation that we are having right now is new material. It doesn't exist in the LLM else. And you have to find ways of injecting new material like this on top of the LLM generated content that you're doing to make it novel and differentiated and have a point of view, maybe be funny, whatever it is. Otherwise, yeah, you're losing a nickel on every transaction and trying to make it up
You're
on
just producing
volume.
a really, really fast slop machine,
A slot
that's just like
machine that's kind of expensive,
pumping out
right?
slop. Like, yeah.
So it's yeah, it's a shame. And then but using the agents not for the pure generative task, but think about the other pieces of that are in the puzzle. So there's information retrieval. How do we get the right topics from different places and put those in front of it could be another LLM agent that has new fresh topics and takes. And then how do we as a human look at it and make sure that it's well formed? There's the human in the loop, make sure it's decent. And then there's the syndication part. Okay, well, you can automate the front and the back, the gathering, the information, the
Right.
resources, the what the resources, and you can automate the syndication and placement and whatever. But if you want to create something that people actually value, that you have to pay attention in there. That doesn't mean these agents can't do really interesting things in the corner of the internet, but
Totally.
people are just they're applying them in ways that are just kind of dumb.
It's almost like just because I can, I will, and that's really not the right answer. It's not always gonna give you the best output or in what I saw, a usable output. Like, I just wouldn't publish any of these assets that I saw. So, yeah, I just thought that was I thought that was really interesting, and I caught myself also in that internal dialogue of like, "Yeah, buddy, this just yeah, you this is not good enough. You can't do that." And I was like, "Oh, wait a minute. What's that word we always say? Yet, right?"
Yet.
Because when you were talking about how it is very, very useful to do, like, I've got my content research agent. I'm finding things that are trending in a lot of conversation right now, stuff that's specific to my content pillars or my ideal client profile, right? Super, super useful. Helping write the content, helping generate videos for maybe it's B-roll, helping do a voiceover, all that stuff. Really, really good, right? But it can't really staple that all together and then just publish it without human eyes on it yet. But you can already see a world because it does work so well in those independent steps that it might be, I don't know, 6 months from now where it does stitch that entire thing together and you can take your hands off of the wheel, or maybe it's a year from now. But when you start to identify all of the singular tasks that it's incredible at, but you still need that human in the loop and you got to babysit it and you got to make sure it's good. That's kind of a harbinger of, okay, yeah, at some point, this really will just be all automated. Like it will get there.
So uh, since I'm in LA, I've been taking Ubers all over the place. When I can't take Waymos, I'm sort of obsessed with Waymos. I think they're fantastic.
Same. Yeah. I feel
but
safer,
they
actually.
don't go everywhere. So I ended up in an Uber last night and was talking to the driver, and it's LA and he's a scriptwriter because of course he is, because it's LA.
Yeah.
And we had this animated conversation about the unlock as far as storytelling. And I know I talked about this a few episodes that we're in this period where anybody can be a storyteller because you have access to this technology and you can do amazing things. And there are a heck of a lot more people with really good stories to tell. And that's, not just stories, but business stories and product stories and whatever. Then there are people that have the technology, the tactical skills, the money, whatever it takes to make those happen. That makes this a golden age for people who have really good ideas, but it also lowers the bar to almost zero as far as people who think that they have good ideas. And it's going to create just a sea of not just slop, but there's going to be 10 times as much gold out there, but there's going to be 100 times as much slop. And the scarce resource is still attention. So focusing on media in particular, people don't usually think of it this way, but media is actually a bit of a real estate game, that there's only so much of it that's out there, and there's only so much attention that consumers actually pay. And that's why you have just flat out battles going on between platforms to get that eye share such
Yeah.
that they can sell advertising. Okay, fine, but you have 100 times the content that's heading our
Yep.
way. And will the gold float to the top? Maybe. Or
Maybe.
will we just get overwhelmed by slop? And will conventions, as far as the way that we market and the way that we get intention, just start falling apart because there's so much slop? And we have to create new ways of engaging with each other. And we don't really know what that looks like yet.
Yeah. I think the other side of that coin, too, is that historically, if we were introduced to a piece of software that did something really incredibly, like we're on this platform, Riverside, right now to record a podcast. Hasn't always been like, and okay, we're not talking about maybe it's not so amazing. But looking back, let's call it 10 years ago, the number of hurdles you had to get over in order to record and publish a podcast were a lot. And these pieces of software started coming out to solve for those different hurdles, to reduce the burden, to make it a lot easier, a lot less expensive. Now, instead of a sound engineer then going back through the episode and making sure that everything is balanced and sounds good and doesn't have background noise, it's just a button you press. Like AI-fied this whole thing, like, make it all better, right? It's like, it's cool. That's awesome. And so on the content side, our brains are kind of used to thinking, all right, now I've got this tool, I can make all this content, and yeah, maybe a bunch of it's slop and it's just going to completely flood everybody and there's not going to be enough attention to go around for all of this content. The other side of that coin is that the same intelligence that's powering the ability to produce this insane volume of content could also power a lot of tools to try to get that attention, right? So it's this weird cat and mouse game where the very tech that we're using to produce the volume of this stuff is also being used in other tools to try to get people's attention. And it's almost like this parallel race happening all the time, right? And I don't know who's going to win. I don't know how it's going to net out. I mean, we'll just see where all the chips land, but it's super, super interesting. And that's, I think, what makes this so different is that it's not just one thing. We're not just in one lane. For every problem that it solves, it might create another one, but then that problem might also be solved by a different use of the same underlying tool set. It's a very strange time in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I just sort of like a big sigh as far as how it's going to play out.
Yeah.
Actually, I think this you've probably seen this as well, since we're surrounded by AI practitioners, and internally, of course, my whole team is AI enabled, and this thing is happening as far as communication, where it's like AI generates one email. And then AI responds to the email on the other side, and everybody knows
Right.
because it's really obvious the
Yeah. You
M
can tell.
dashes and whatever. But it's still faster to just let Claude craft the email or let Shortwave craft the email
Hmm.
and, add my thoughts into it. Hey, respond to Sonia with X, Y, and Z. And it makes it sort of overly formal. And it's not very genuine either. You're adding salutations and, all of these other pieces that are kind of pro forma, but like, I sort of wonder if we're just going to start shooting bullets back and forth because those are the authentic pieces of the communication as opposed to all the fluff that AI has added on top of it.
Yeah, yeah. I almost feel like it's one of the growing pains of AI is the fluff, the slop, the stuff to sort through. It's kind of like, humans have just been handed fire and we can stay warm and cook our food. And oh, we just burned our village down too. Whoops, right? Like there's all these byproducts of this technology that we almost have to get through and learn how to work with and move around that are getting in the way as opposed to helping. And we've talked about this before too, like the amount of content just internally inside of one of these companies. I mean, I think you're a great example of this because you're always building these internal tools and then you'll have these little pauses where you're like, oh my gosh, like the amount of stuff this is like producing in these Slack channels and now people have to read and understand and disseminate, make decisions about. Like, am I creating more work that's actually moving the ball forward? Or am I just keeping people stuck in the cyclical pattern of trying to keep up with what these models are throwing at them at any given day, right? It's again, like sometimes it really is like, one step forward, two steps back, and then you got to say, okay, this wasn't the best use of that tool. Now I'm going to try this. Like you have to experiment.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit torn, and we're both big fans of dictation. That being like a key part of my workflows is
Yeah.
dictating everything with Whisperflow or whatever your tool of choice is. But that's a canon that I'm dictating 30,000 words a week,
Yeah.
and that's combined with all of the bots that have all the ClickUp tasks and have all of these other pieces in place. And I've had to add a layer to that it's like, okay, there's a repository of everything that's going on, and then I need to make sure that I'm reaching out to people individually so that they can sort through the noise.
Yeah.
Because yes, more context is better. The LLMs like more information, so being able to pull it from a bunch of places, that's better. But more noise in channels like Slack is or ClickUp or wherever you might live is not necessarily better. So how do you keep people focused on the right pieces of noise or not noise and also be able to like get the information they need without creating new layers of complexity? And that's been one of my internal goals, is to make sure that everybody has a clear idea every day of what they're supposed to be focused on.
Yeah.
And everybody has clear line of sight to the tools that allow them to get the information, be that client transcripts or ClickUp projects or email or whatever it is, such that the system doesn't break down when they need to reach across the aisle and collaborate with somebody who may or may not be available based on work scheduling, geographic location, whatever it is. So that's sort of the promised land, I think.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit of a rough adolescence as you're getting through it. I imagine I love my people to death because they're they bear with me, but I have like a howitzer of information that that's coming out of me and my bot army every day. And
Yeah.
I love it. I think it's great. But being on the other end of that, wow. Sorry, guys.
It's like getting the email every morning, from that one manager who just writes a novel, and you're like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to sit here and read like 17 paragraphs in this email. Now Gemini will summarize that for you. It's analogous to a lot of what ends up getting thrown at people. You're like, wow, I've got a ton of stuff I've got to now sort through to understand what do I really need to be paying attention to. And I'll have to share with you, like, I've been working on this agentic personal assistant that does all sorts of crazy tool calls for that very purpose of trying to cut through all the noise and get me focused on what's most important for the day. That's its end goal, working to varying degrees. But yeah, that's too long of a story, almost as long as a story of what I just feel like we have to touch on before we jump. You dropped this word and then just moved right on. But Mythos. A lot of people are going to be hearing about Mythos because this is going to have real world impacts to a lot of people's day-to-day jobs, things they're going to be hearing about at their companies. So the TLDR is Anthropic dropped, well, they didn't drop a model. They built a model, didn't release it to the public, the most powerful model yet. It's called Mythos. This was accidentally leaked in late March when Fortune found their draft of their blog post on an unsecured database, which is a little embarrassing. But Anthropic confirmed it. Then they officially launched this thing on April 8th alongside what they're calling Project Glasswing. And this isn't any kind of specialized security tool. This is a general purpose reasoning model that happens to be really, really good at finding cybersecurity vulnerabilities. The big reason why they didn't release it to the public. So in the past few weeks, it found thousands of these zero-day bugs in every major OS and browser, even including a 27-year-old flaw in OpenBSD, which powers all sorts of things like security networks and routers and thought to be the most secure thing in the world. So about 40 companies, including big companies like Apple and Google and Microsoft, JP Morgan Chase, they've got early access to this to use it defensively because Anthropic won't release it to the public. And this really matters at work because every piece of software your company runs, your CRM, your payroll, your operation systems, your email, it all has vulnerabilities that are sitting inside there right now. And Mythos can find them faster than any human security team in history ever could. And so the question starts to become, well, who's going to find them first? And how big are these vulnerabilities? And are they in your Coinbase account? Are they in your Bank of America account? Are they in your sensitive company information? So this is kind of that future stuff that we were talking about. Like one day AI is gonna da 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 da, and this is gonna be a big problem. Guess what? It's already here. Like it's here, and it's like in a weird place where some people have this kneecapped version of this insane model. Most people don't. But when will this just be generally available, and when will it become a problem? So
Okay, so first off, a zero-day exploit is not something that people generally know what it is, but it's when it's been discovered and it hasn't been fixed yet. So there's this window of time between the bad guys and the good guys. The good guys have to figure out it exists. If the bad guys figure out it exists, they happily go to town and do bad things.
the day you found out your door was unlocked and it's been unlocked and
It's been unlocked for a long time, and nobody even knew about it. So that's what a zero-day exploit
credit
is.
card and keys were sitting right on the coffee table.
So the smaller the platform, the bigger the problem. So if you use some bespoke CRM that does, I don't know, restoration of Toyota trucks or whatever the heck this crazy thing is that you've been paying for that makes sense in your business. I know some businesses that do like coffee wholesaling, and they're like agriculture CRMs or ERPs that deal with agriculture, and like they're tiny little platforms that are pretty expensive, and those are going to be the last ones to fix this stuff because they don't have the big dev teams. They're not getting the heads up. They certainly don't have access to the model to test it. So in your universe, you want to be aware of small fry vendors that you're working with because that's where vulnerabilities are likely to come from, although they can come from anywhere. The other thing, and I'm going on my third speaking event of this week here that I've been telling everybody as a result of this, is if you aren't using secure passwords,
Oh my goodness.
you need to use secure
No-brainer.
passwords. So just do not pass go. go download 1Password, LastPass. You can actually lean into Apple passwords.
I was gonna say, if you're in the Apple ecosystem,
Just use Apple passwords. Okay.
yeah, yeah, it's free.
In any case, these are the ones that generate the annoyingly long one-off passwords. And if you think you're clever because you have Rover with one at the end and then you add an exclamation point, you're not, because as soon as something gets cracked, like let's just say it's that coffee CRM and you've used that password, even if that password isn't identical, what systems like this will do is they'll extremely rapidly create all the permutations of it.
Every variation.
Every
Yeah.
variation, replace all
Yeah.
the vowels with numbers,
Oh, the
create
S,
yeah.
we'll try a dollar sign. One, we'll try an out, like,
Yeah.
it'll do it so fast.
So you have to do this. Like, you really have to do this. It's
You
painful.
shouldn't
It
know your
takes
passwords. Like, that's a sign that you're doing it right, is that you don't know any of
you
your
don't know the
passwords. You have
passwords.
to go to the locker, you have to hit copy, you gotta hit paste. Yes, it's a little bit annoying, but this, I mean, this is something everybody should have done, like, 15 years ago. I mean, that's how long I've been using password lockers, but it's now reached a boiling point. Like, you have to do this. You have to do this.
And people get very frustrated with two-factor authentication. This is when Google pops up and says, check your phone or whatever. Have you noticed that it's happening more and more often?
Oh,
Well,
for
the
sure.
reason it's happening more and more often is because there are more incursion attempts that are going on that are flagging things, and they're happening at scale.
Yep.
And, somewhere behind the scenes, I sort of picture it like that scene in Titanic when like the ship's going down and the radio operators are running around like trying to like keep things intact. There are poor souls in network security who are just battling these demons
Oh,
like
man.
all day long. And the rest of us generally don't have to deal with it. Those two FAs are really frustrating. I get that they interrupt your workflow, but they really do work. And at least at this stage of development, it's a pretty secure way to go about things.
Yeah.
So in anything that touches real money, real accounts, real sensitive information, you need a one-time password and you need some sort of 2FA in place. Like, I'm not that guy who's saying, oh no, they're gonna that the criminals are gonna rip us off, or at least I wasn't that
Yeah.
guy. And now with a tool like this, they totally are. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And just for people who don't know, like when we talk about 2FA, that's like, you have your username, you have your password, you're going to log into your software. 2FA, the two-factor authentication is just one more layer. The three most popular ones are that it'll send you an email, right? If your email's already been hacked, that's a problem. It could send you a text message. If your SIM card has been spoofed, that's also a problem. The most robust one is probably an authenticator app. Google has a free authenticator app. And what this thing does is it's a digital representation of way back in the day, probably dating myself, but we used to have like these little RSA keys, right? And you had this little plastic device with an LCD screen that would always be displaying a number that would change like every 15 seconds. And that's how you'd get into your corporate bank account or into your top secret corporate CRM or whatever it was, right? This is a version of that that lives on your phone. And so just have a list of all the different things that you log into that are dynamically generating these codes that are that one more step for you to get in. And I'll tell you, Kevin, like I get super busy and I have noticed like, over the last 6 months, the ask for platforms that didn't require this before saying, hey, we recommend adding this 2FA. Do you want to do it? And I'm like, skip, I'll do it later. Now I'm like, yes, yes,
yes.
yes. Like loading up this laundry list of 2FA codes in my Google Auth app because this is getting real. So from the companies you've been talking to, and I know we're about to run out of time here, but does this feel more optimistic or scary? Like, what is some of the feedback that you're hearing so far about not only the Mythos ability to be able to do this, but the fact that it's been given to a very select number of companies? And for me, it kind of feels like, hey, SMBs over here, we're scared. What's going on? Like, and we work with a lot of SMBs. Like, what is the general feedback that you're getting for something like that? Or do people understand even the scope and scale of this?
Even people that are technical are not paying attention to this.
Okay.
So it's
Again, just
even
us.
just my last call was with a
Just me
CTO of a
staying up
very
at
big
2 in the
company.
morning worrying. Yeah.
Everybody's busy. Their heads down, and they do have cyber experts who are paying attention to this stuff, and they're starting to ring the bells. But the basic things will really help. So use 2FA, use one-time passwords. I mean, just think if what happened in your small business tomorrow if somebody just cleared out all your accounts. I mean, could you survive that? Maybe the bank will honor it, maybe they won't. Regardless, it's going to be a nightmare. You're not going to make payroll. Horrible, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I might be overthinking this a little bit, but even with things like these password lockers, right? There's a lot of password lockers out there. I don't know how big any of these given companies are. I don't know how robust they are. And I actually did start to lean into the whole Apple ecosystem of saving passwords just because I'm like, okay, very big company. This would be disastrous if somebody found a vulnerability in that. They're probably going to be paying more attention than most. And so, kind of, again, getting behind the companies that have access to this model that are looking at this first and deeply. Google as well, right? Like Google Authenticator. That's why I'm kind of like choosing that over SMS or email verification for 2FA. These are the kinds of things to start to pay attention to as we get into these rapid iterations of models that are surpassing what I didn't think we'd have for at least another year. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is here now. Amazing.
So the other related bit here is from an analog perspective. If your organization is moving money around, or if you have elderly relatives, whatever it is, have some sort of analog passphrase that guarantees it, because it's trivial to deep fake, particularly voice, and even video is getting better.
Oh, voice is so good already, and video is like really coming up too. Yeah.
And it really is starting to happen in SMBs, where the CFO calls up the controller or calls up, the payables clerk and basically yells at them, and
Yeah.
they transfer money because
Totally.
it sounds like the CFO, like it has their mannerisms and
Yeah.
whatever. Why would they doubt it? So something as simple as having that passphrase for family members and for critical transactions, totally analog, but might save you $1 million.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, yeah. This is the new version of all the spam email that I've been getting for years to our accounts payable department with just an invoice, right? And saying, "Oh, this is past due. You've got to pay this." And the accounts payable person is like, "Hey, I don't remember this vendor." I'm like, "It's because it's fake. Ignore that. That's a scam." It's getting next level.
All
Kevin,
right.
that's
Good
it for
talk.
us. It's been real, and we'll do it again next week. We'll see you. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to send us a question to answer on the show, email me at elijah@spark6.com. That is SPARK, the number 6.com, or Kevin at ascendlabs.ai. To learn more about AI strategy and training for your business, visit Kevin's company, Ascend AI Labs, at ascendlabs.ai. And to learn more about design and development of custom AI solutions, visit my agency at spark6.com. You can also sign up for my free newsletter, AI Framework Friday, by visiting spark6.com/newsletter.